My name is Marco Lanave, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. I personally owe much gratitude to several women in sports, including the one who gave me my first full-time position in minor league baseball, Stephanie Brown-Lonserich, and also my colleague who's been my colleague longer than anyone in baseball, Andrea Williams, as well as a key teacher in my professional development, Linda McNabb, who is also part of the panel that we have tonight. So we have 4 women joining us this evening. We intended to have a 5th panelist as well, Joey Arrieta, who has been instrumental with the Akron Racers, the professional softball in Akron, Ohio. She right now is still recovering from surgery, getting better every day, but Joey was not able to join us this evening. So we have 4 panelists this evening, and in alphabetical order, Jan Burke is the Director of Ticket Sales and Service for the Canton Charge. Emily Gates is the Director of Sport Management for baseball, field hockey, and volleyball for the Ohio High School Athletic Association. Linda McNabb is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, and Donna Orender is the CEO of Orender Unlimited, and also the former president of the WNBA and Senior Vice President of the PGA Tour. So we'll have them introduce themselves in that order, give you just a little bit of their background before we jump into questions as well. So again, submit your questions through the Q&A, and we'll have those later on in the program. So we'll start with Jan Burke. Jan, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Marco. I'm happy to be a part of this. Thank you for inviting me. Just a little about myself. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. Actually taught high school for 9 years before jumping into the sports world. Started with a minor league baseball team, the Mississippi Braves, was there for about 4 years, and then made the move to not always so sunny Ohio, and now work as Director of Ticket Sales and Service for the Canton Charge, the G League team of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
And now we'll go to Emily Gates.
Thank you, Marco. So great to be on this panel tonight. A little bit about me. So I'm actually from Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I went to the University of Arkansas and studied recreation and sport management. So it was pretty recreation focused since I really wanted to learn more about the sports industry. So I decided to go to grad school, which is what brought me to Columbus, Ohio. So I went to grad school at the Ohio State University and studied sport management. So I was a graduate assistantship in my time as a grad student, had many different internship opportunities in many different fields in the sports industry. And then right upon graduation, I got my first job with the OHSAA, where I currently work. So my job has shifted around a bit. That was back in 2014 when I first started. My first job with them was I was a program coordinator, so essentially an assistant to the sport administrators. And now, as Marco detailed, I am a director of sport management and serve as the sport administrator for baseball, volleyball, and field hockey in the state of Ohio.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome to Linda McNabb.
Thanks, Marco. My name is Linda McNabb, and I am the Vice President of Sales for the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp in Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah, there you go, Donna, yay. I 26 years ago got into the world of professional baseball kind of by happenstance. Wasn't planning on getting into professional sports whatsoever. Was a salesperson selling radio advertising, and the team in Fort Myers, Florida was my client, and got a phone call on a Friday afternoon asking me to go home, think about getting into baseball, and to call the team on Monday and let me know if I'd be interested. And that's how it all started. So at that point, I think it was kind of more of, well, I'll try anything once as long as I can make money at it. And here we go, 26 years later, still doing it, and fell in love with the business of minor league baseball work for, I've been fortunate to work for really great people, having a whole lot of fun. So that's kind of me, done a little bit of everything in the sport, and you know, still doing this crazy thing. So love it.
Well, thank you very much, Linda. And now, last but not least, Donna Orender. Welcome, Donna.
Well, thank you, Marco. It is so nice, Jan and Emily and Linda. By the way, Linda is an awesome sports executive, honestly. And I get to see her up close because I'm here in Jacksonville. But I feel blessed, like all of us, to work in this amazing field of sport, right? It's work, but it's also play, right? I like working at play. It's a good thing. I have been involved in sports my whole life. I was an athlete. I played a million sports, exaggeration for about 7. Settled on basketball, played on one of the top teams in the nation, became a professional basketball player. And from there, I actually used sports to get into the business side. So I worked on global media for the PGA Tour. I worked for sports networks like ABC and I guess one of the sports regionals. And eventually we ended up working for the PGA Tour for 17 years. I worked for guys such as Arnold Palmer. Do any of you remember him? Like, it's so sad when you get older. Like, it's amazing how quickly perspectives change. But Tiger Woods, and I guess today would be maybe Ricky. You guys would all know Ricky. And then I got drafted. Adam Silver, the current commissioner of the NBA, called me and said, hey, would you be interested in running the WNBA? And I thought, you know what? Not many jobs like that. It's a passion. I feel sports has been a gift. It's defined who I was, taught me the lessons I needed to lead and be successful. And so ultimately I said yes. And so that was what I did. I became the commissioner of the WNBA. I did that for enough years to know that the league will further go on, and which it is successfully. I hope you're all watching some of that while you're watching baseball and all the other sports that we represent here. I have kids who are athletes. I have a Division I athlete. I have kids who were AAU athletes. So I feel that my perspective in sports kind of fills a whole spectrum. And thank you for having me. It's really great to be here and with all of you.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you all, our panelists, for joining us. As you can tell, attending this event, all of these women have a unique background and really some great value to offer to our attendees this evening. So again, if you have a question that you would like to be answered in the course of this evening, you can submit that through the Q&A feature. Go to the bottom of your screen and click Q&A to submit the question there. And Jenna Smith, our organizer, will be able to work through those. So we've got some questions prepared. And we know that many of you in the audience may be looking to work in sports, be women looking to start a career or thinking about getting into sports. So we're going to ask Emily here. Emily, what are some general tips that have helped you advance early on in your career and has helped to get you to your current position?
Yeah, so I would say my biggest tip is honestly building relationships. For probably all of us sitting here and all of you watching, you're going to hear repeatedly, the world of sports, the hardest thing is getting your foot in the door. So you're trying to essentially brand yourself and thinking of, how can I make myself stand out from my other peers? And one thing I really noticed is really just taking opportunities to build relationships with people. So that's as simple as just going up and talking to someone. I remember I was an intern. It was a week-long seminar where there were people from like the VP of Major League Baseball down to the people that put in the seats at Fenway Park. So there were all kinds of people in the sports world. And that's really intimidating as an undergraduate student. And what I noticed is I was one of the only people going up and talking to these people. So just remember that whether it's all of us on this panel, everyone in sports was in your shoes at one time. So they understand that it's challenging. So my biggest tip is just making sure you're talking to people, because in this scenario, you know, I play basketball. So, and I might meet Donna sometime and I'm like, oh, well, I've never met Donna before today. I've always had an interest in the WNBA. So I'll remember to call Donna if I'm ever looking for something new, but it's how to make yourself stand out. And then the other piece I'll say that I've really carried with me for my commencement speech for when I graduated grad school, we had an individual, his name is escaping me, but what he said really stuck with me. He made the point of always take your opportunities and always show up. So he made the example of if you're invited to do something, you show up because those people thought about you and you never know what's going to come from that. So it's as simple as if someone has invited you to a baby shower, you know, those people thought of you to be there for your special day. Or if it's just doing something like this, being a part of this panel, I'm getting to know 4 people that I never knew. And from that, you can build so many connections. So those are my biggest tips, honestly, to build relationships and take opportunities and don't be afraid to just go and have a conversation with someone because it might not be what you think you're interested in, but once a conversation starts, they might say, hey, I know this person who's involved with this. Let me connect you to.
Well, thank you, Emily. That's a great insight. And I know probably a sentiment that many of our panelists would echo as well.
That was excellent. Excellent.
Thanks, Donna.
So kind of building on that, people are thinking of you, want to ask, what can viewers do to make themselves more marketable or maybe thought of more? Linda, Donna, do you have any insight in that perspective?
Yeah, Marco, I think one of the things that people have to remember is that it's similar to sales, it's similar to interviewing, is there's a lot of people out there looking for work. There's a lot of people out there, you're one of many. And, you know, so many times folks try to rely on their resume. You know, they just send them out. Well, it's what makes, I think everybody has to remember, what makes you memorable? What makes you stand out? And that's what's the hardest. I think we have to remember, what do you bring to the table? It's not just about a piece of paper. And if you get an interview, that's what I'm looking for. We all have file cabinets full of probably great folks that are looking, but it's that one thing, it's that it. We all call it the it, and nobody really is able to define what it is. I think you and I had a conversation not too long ago about what is it? You know, what is that one thing that makes somebody stand out that no one else has? And it's different all the time. It's somebody that's going to go the extra mile, somebody that's going to ask questions, somebody that's going to challenge me. I'm not looking for always experience, but what I am looking for is curiosity. I'm looking for somebody that's always going to want to know, that's going to ask questions, that's not going to be afraid to walk down the hallway, that is going, they may be afraid to pick up the phone, but they're going to pick up the phone and they want to learn, and they're going to find out, what am I made of, and here's what I'm going to do under pressure, and they're going to ask me questions. So those are some of the things that I think, you know, what makes yourself more marketable. You gotta be different. You gotta stand out because you're one of many. Donna, I don't know, in your, you know, when you're looking for that special someone.
Yes, you know, I'm always looking for that special someone.
That's right.
Always.
That's exactly right.
And you know, it's interesting. It's we'd like to see it scientific. There's lots of algorithms now that people will boast about using. But it's usually a combination of things depending on what exactly you're looking for. Right. I was looking through my file here because recently I do a show every week called Refresh, And I had two amazing HR directors, and I said to them, what are you looking for? And so I wanted to quote the experts. But I do this rather often. I look for experience. I think that's important because that is a differentiator. How have you spent your time in pursuit of something that you think you want to make your potentially life's work, or at least a piece of your life's work? And so invariably, I want to know that somebody's decided that they were going to try to get an internship. And to your point, Emily, relationships are the most important thing. And you have to work hard to develop them. You really do. And if I would say someone in our collective world who's amazing at it, it's Mr. Babby, right?
Yes.
There is, right? He's an amazing relationship builder. And what comes along with relationship building, but it's thoughtfulness and kindness and generosity, all of those things. And they sound like ordinary things, but most people don't have all of those things or not thinking about those things. And so they are differentiators. So if you put experience along with that and curiosity, and then of course there's attitude. And there's generational expectations in attitude. I hear so much about generation, the millennials are this, the Zers are this, or whatever. But at the end of the day, we all have to be united around getting work done. And how do you express to somebody that you're going to, again, Emily, because I haven't heard Jan's perception on this yet. I'm sure, Jan, you'd be contributing as well. You have to show up. Yeah. And how do you demonstrate that you show up? Some of it's by volunteering. Again, it's by getting internships and jobs. It's taking the initiative and doing things on your own that are related. So that's what I think makes people stand out. I just hired a young woman, by the way, and what made her stand out was her commitment to education. We do work with teen girls, and she had done work with teen girls in several countries. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. She didn't have to do that, but she saw it. So she showed initiative. So those kinds of things.
I wrote down something when I was reading all of these to prepare that I wrote, don't apply for positions that you don't like and that you don't have the skills for. And I find that happening sometimes too. I don't know if you guys have run into this, but working in minor league baseball, we have a long season. We play 70 home games. And often we have had individuals that, number one, everyone on our team has to sell. And sometimes we'll have individuals that we will hire and they don't want to sell. Yeah. And I think, well, wait a minute. You knew this was something that you had to do, and now all of a sudden you don't want to do this. Or we play 70 games and you don't want to work the hours. So it becomes a situation that I also think that you have to, if you're looking for work, know what you're getting into almost in advance, so that you don't find yourself in roles where you're playing out of position, if you know what I mean by that. So do your research in advance of positions or a sport, if it is sports that you're getting into.
Put me on at the end. I would boss the water.
Well, I want to transition from there because I know Jan, we haven't heard from her just yet, but Jan, you've got an interesting story as to how you got into sports and what's made you successful.
Yes, thank you, Marco. It is interesting, and it's funny because it kind of relates to everything that Emily and Donna and Linda were just mentioning. So as I mentioned earlier, I taught high school for 9 years. I didn't plan on changing careers. I love teaching. Teachers in Mississippi don't make a ton of money, so I generally always kept a part-time job. And for 2 or 3 years, that part-time job was just simply working in the ticket office for the Mississippi Braves. So I was a part-time employee, came in with my khakis and polo shirt, sat behind the window and sold tickets. And to all these ladies' point, I think everything I've ever done, I've actually worked at a McDonald's and put this, as a high school kid. So I kind of say, even if it's, you're working at a McDonald's, I've just kind of had it always in my mind to put my best foot forward, because you never know who you're going to run into. Anybody could have been coming to that ticket window. It could have been, relatives of students that I taught, or you just never know who you're talking to, what you can do for them, and by the same token, what they can do for you. So, I was the part-time employee that came in and said, hello to all the full-time employees, made sure they knew my name, with no ulterior motive other than that's just, something that I've always do. tried to, be the best ticket seller that there was, was constantly asking to be moved to will call. Let me answer some calls during the day. It's summertime. I don't have class right now. I'll come in and do some extra things. And so I think just, by that, just trying to, let everybody see my personality and do a good job. I was actually approached and they asked if I had ever considered sales. And I said, no, I have not. But had some conversations with them. It just happened to be around a time in my life where I needed to make a little more income, and not only that, have the potential to make more income. So I was terrified. I remember sitting in the interview and saying, I just want to reiterate that I have 0 sales experience. Like, I am going to give this my all, but I want to be honest, I don't have the sales experience. And if I'm here for 2 or 3 months in a full-time capacity and it's not a good fit, somebody needs to let me know. So I was just very, cautionary or cautious with everyone. But I started out as a sales associate. My sales director was great. He was very encouraging. He taught me that, it's not really about the sales. There's no way really to teach how to sell. We have scripts and we have, there are tips and things of that nature, and you can go to training, but sales is a lot of selling yourself. It's not just selling the product, it's selling yourself. So he just said, be confident. All the reasons why we hired you, your people skills, your personality, how outgoing you are, those things are going to carry. Those things are going to carry you. You're going to learn, get the product knowledge. You're going to learn the prices of everything. Don't fret about that. I think that bothered me at first too. I needed to know it all, like day one. But he just instilled in me to use the skills that I already had to push myself forward in sales. So actually started out as a sales associate. I was there 4 years and left as director of operations. Again, I think that's because I try to insert myself everywhere. So I was doing sales, but I wanted to know how did the suites run? What are we doing with the players? I ended up, booking hotel for all the players. I think I tried to be in every role in that job possible. And in the back of my mind, I thought, if I can do everything, they can't get rid of me because they need me so badly, right? Like, I need to make myself essential to this team. So that's how I got into it. And I just took that advice. And again, sales director was great, just modeled the positivity, saw that, if people were taking out trash, even though he was at a level above, most people, that, first one there, last one to leave, pulling tarp with the rest of the group. So I always tried to do that too, like be a part of everything, never be above the smallest jobs. I think maybe the last year there, one of the things that I was doing was scraping signage off of the inside of the bathroom walls, but that's what it is in minor league sports, right? And you do it all, and you be a team player. And if you work hard for your people, they'll work hard for you. So.
And Jan, you noted also in there, the mentorship was a big part of it for you, to empower you, right?
Yeah, that was a huge part. So it was great to have someone who, when you're doubting yourself a little bit, can sort of bring that confidence back to you. And so, as a mentor now to younger people, it's not just what you say, it's what you do. So I honestly try to model the open door policy, model the positivity, model the hard work, just so that, I can share with someone else what was shared with me.
That's fantastic too.
Thank you.
And Donna, I know that you've been involved in mentorship throughout your career, and even built a business to focus on that as well. How important would you say mentorship is?
I think it's vital. I didn't have mentors when I was younger. That's actually why I think I'm so focused on it now. I felt really lonely. I was, virtually the only woman wherever I was at. A lot of men mentored me. They were there to help me and support my career, more in a sponsorship mode, in that they were confident in my ability to execute and do a good job. But that's different than having somebody to talk to who would understand where you're specifically coming from. And so, so to this day, we do run mentorship programs for girls and for our women. And I feel like it's vital to have many mentors, if you will, to be able to, I'm telling you what, that phone never rings. But it's off now. Sorry about that. That's real life in whatever world we're living in. That's the new normal. to have many different mentors, because there's different people in our lives who can be really expert and help us in certain areas, as opposed to thinking there's one person who's going to be the be all end all for everything. So how do you find a mentor is often a question that people ask, Marco. I'm not sure here who has a mentor. Often if you meet somebody and you feel like there's some kind of connection, you can just ask them and say, listen, here's what I'm working on, and I would love to be able to call you. Emily, as you said, you reach out, you build a relationship. Can I call you once or twice to talk about this? And generally people will say yes. And that's the beginning. And then in your workplace, you can find mentors, but you'll probably find sponsors. You want to be attached to somebody who believes in who you are as an employee and your future growth, and have somebody who wants to tag you and then bring them up with them. I think that's also very important. I don't know if all of you have similar kind of thoughts on that, but that's kind of been my experience and where we take our girls now.
I think that's a really good point. I didn't have a female mentor either, or anyone going in, a woman that I thought that I could talk to. So I want to be that person, and I still love meeting women like the three of you. And again, it's someone that, and more than just someone, like you said, multiple people is great, but it's someone you can share your frustrations with, someone you can share your successes with, someone who you can ask advice, and then, like you said, Donna, someone who's going to sponsor you and be your champion and help you make those connections that we talked about earlier in the conversation.
Right.
Yeah, Donna, I'm exactly like you. As I was growing up in this business and in my career path, I had no women that were mentors. I had great men in my life that gave me wings and that helped me along. And that was wonderful, but there is a big difference in talking to men than there is talking to women that were in those positions, and I didn't have that. So it made it very difficult because they didn't understand, and men and women think very differently, and especially when you get into leadership positions where there are some frustrations and some things that we deal with that are a little bit different, and especially when you have families and relationships and kids and there's all those stressors that go along with that the balance that is very difficult. It's, you kind of are winging it and doing it on your own. And so often now, as I've gotten older and my kids are grown and I now have grandchildren, and I'm asked those questions of, how were you able to balance raising as a single mom 2 kids and being a president of a team or a vice president and growing? It's, I can be honest with gals and say it wasn't easy. It can be done. But I love to be able to share that and help women along with that. So I think you're right. It is critical that women have other women to talk to. And I think that one thing that I would say to a lot of women, especially younger women, help each other. Don't tear each other down. Help each other up. There is, don't worry about what somebody else is doing as a negative. Look at each other, and we got to help each other move along and help each other grow as a positive, not in any way negative.
Marco, we're cool talking to you though, Marco, just so you know. This is cool.
Well, I feel very honored and humbled to be here. I want to pose a question. Speaking of that growth aspect, is there a time that you can recall maybe where you missed the mark or felt like you made a mistake, and how did you handle it and grow from it?
How much time do we have? So life is full of mistakes. And, it sounds so cliche, but you honestly do learn from those, and that's how you grow. And I'll tell people, I'm a little older, and tell people that I wouldn't go back and be young again or redo my, my teenage years or my 20s unless I could take with me all of the knowledge that I had now. And that's the honest to goodness truth. And I was going to keep this light and say the time that I face planted pulling tarp on a 4th of July game in front of 8,000 people. But, I think that I'll say that, and I think that this is changing, and I feel like it's changing. I feel like our climate in general, not in sports, but our climate in general is changing. There was a time, and there's actually been more than one time where I was put in an uncomfortable situation, and someone's behavior was inappropriate, and I didn't want to make waves or make a big deal of it. Didn't want to be someone who caused a problem. So I tried for a very long time to deal with it on my own. So I just say to other women, get that help. You never have to feel uncomfortable. If you have a mentor, if that's the only person you feel like talking to, use that mentor for that. But just as an older woman, I would never let myself be in that position again. So I just say to anyone younger, anyone going in, and I hope that, again, our whole climate is changing, but speak up for yourself. Don't ever let yourself be in a situation where you are uncomfortable.
So Jan, first off, I want to say if you're older, I don't know what I am.
Well, Linda, listen, my daughters are 22 and 23, so that makes me older, but thank you.
Yeah,
But
right.
Jan, I just want to say, I have never heard that question answered that way, and I thought that was spectacular.
Yes.
Right?
I ran it by my husband. I was like, listen, is that too heavy? He's like, I think that in a panel full of women, you should say it. So
no, it was great. It's a beautiful way to remind all of us
right.
that we have rights and that we should speak up and that we should support each other in that.
Thank you.
That was so important. I just learned something so valuable right now. Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Very much so. Marco, when I read this, I had a hard time with, similar to Jan, what to say about this. Is it a specific thing? Is it one individual situation in a job? And I wrote down 3 things. 3 things came to my mind. And the first one was, I'm a, you haven't figured out, a talker. I've been doing this quite a long time, and I'm a pretty opinionated person, and Mr. Babby and Marco and any number of people they're all probably sitting there shaking their head going, oh yeah. But the first mistake that I made was thinking that I knew more than my superiors and challenging them with their decision-making ability to a point that instead of it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to have opinions, but to out and out challenging my superiors with their decisions, I think that was, when you say mistake or missing a mark, I think we have to be careful sometimes. There's a line. And so that was one of the first things that came to my mind. It's okay to have strong, like I say, have strong opinions and question, but I think what I learned is that, there's a line, and sometimes we have to be careful. The second thing that I've learned in my career and in my life is that I'm not irreplaceable. As good as I may think I am, as wonderful as I may think I am, everybody is replaceable. And there is never a point ever that you stop learning. And we have to, we always have to keep learning. I am, even at the stage in my career, I was hired to do a job. I was hired to do an exceptional job. not just an average job, but I am being paid to do the best possible job that I can do. And there is probably somebody out there that can do it better than me. So I better be on my game. And I better not stop doing that at all times. So that's another lesson that I think I've learned in my career, that when there have been times that I have gotten a little big for my britches, where I've thought, they've got me, and I'm replaceable, and I've been replaced. So that was another lesson I've learned in my career. And the third was, sometimes I've taken a position in my lifetime where I was not suited for that job, but I took it. And I think we have to learn that not always are we suited for a position, and that's unfair to the company as well as to myself. So it's knowing what my skill set is, and being honest with myself, and also being honest with an employer. So those were the three things that came to mind for me. And when I read this, when it was, those mistakes, or did I miss a mark? And what did I learn from? It took me a long time to come up with those things, and they were not nearly as good as yours, Jan. So I'm like, wow.
I was listening to you thinking the three things that you just said are definitely on my list.
No,
100%, yes.
It's, but those were the three things that came to mind when I think about, the coming to almost kind of like an end of my career, I guess, in some ways, those missed the mark things that I hope I learned from. So anyways, there you go.
Well, and Linda, you talk a little bit about, we're working with colleagues and maybe thinking that you might know something more than them, but from a positive perspective, Donna, because you mentioned earlier, you were drafted to lead the WNBA, and that was, I imagine, a big example of respect that you were being shown. But in general ways, for women that are looking to get into working in sports and advancing in sports, how can they gain respect and stand out among a set of colleagues that probably is mostly male?
Listen, I'm going to defer to Emily here. I thought Emily gave a really great answer. So I'm going to, Emily, we've just known each other a small amount of time, but can I quote you already? Is that okay?
Go for it.
Her whole idea about relationships. I talk about, you have to build relationships with people and know what you're talking about. So I was somebody who played sports. I excelled at the highest level you could. So I always thought that gave me a little bit of an edge. All the guys I worked with, they wanted to be, at that point, I'm going to date myself, but we're all in baseball here, almost like Mickey Mantle, or they wanted to be, who else if you didn't want to be Mickey Mantle, like who do you want to be? Alex Rodriguez? Or, I don't know, who do you want to be? Jan, I don't know, you're doing basketball. Linda, who do you want to be? If don't ask Linda. Marco, who do you want to be? Anyway, they weren't there. I worked in golf. They wanted to be Jack Nicklaus, or they wanted to be Tiger Woods, all of those things. I had achieved that. And so I felt that gave me some street cred that took me along. I think you really want to know your subject. So if you want to work in sports, then you should know sports. You should be comfortable in being, having conversations about what you do and where you are. Now, in sales, if you're doing sales, you can be a great salesperson, right? I would take somebody who can sell and knows less about my sport than somebody who knows everything and can't sell, right? And so it depends on the area of the business that you're into, but wherever you are, you want to be respected because you show up. That was another thing. Emily, look, I'm quoting you right and left here, all right? You show up, you do the work as well, if not better than anybody else, and you build relationships, and they're authentic relationships. People use the word networking a lot. I don't like it. I like the word connection. Especially for women, it has a lot more authenticity to it. It's where you're invested in somebody else's success. And by being invested in someone else's success, generally they'll be invested in yours.
Yeah, I can relate to that a little with some specific examples, especially working with high school sports in the state of Ohio and really working with so many coaches. So it's the pieces about that Donna was just saying about showing up and building relationships and having that knowledge. And then some of it is kind of exuding confidence. Like, I know what I'm talking about, and I hope there's one day females in the industry, and especially male dominated sports, don't feel like they really have to prove themselves anymore. So I kind of have two quick examples. So we have an Ohio High School Baseball Coaches Association, and every January they host this huge clinic. So as the baseball administrator for the state, they asked me to come just kind of give a brief OHSA update, that type of thing. So I walk in this huge ballroom, and it's probably 500 to 600 individuals, and this is no exaggeration. It's all baseball coaches. I am the only female in the entire room. And we took a picture, my boss and I, because we were just like, so this was 2019, and like it kind of brings you back in time a little. You're like, I can't believe this is still a thing. But so I'm standing up at the podium talking, and it's just funny because you're looking at everyone's faces. And my very first week of work was the state baseball tournament. So I've spent my time working with the sport of baseball and building those relationships with the coaches, you know, showing up, responding to their emails, their questions, if they have issues, working with them. And so I'm standing up at the podium, and, you know, 50% of them are, you know, they're respecting me, they're listening. And I would assume the other 50% are like, what does this girl know about baseball? And so it's having that knowledge. And then another quick example is the high school sports, kind of like the NCAA of collegiate athletics. We work with the National Federation of High School Sports, so the NFHS. So every other year they create our playing rules that we use. So every other year, for all the sports, they have, they had in-person meetings. And so we were in Indianapolis, and it was a 2-day meeting. So they had, I believe, baseball, track and field, and softball meetings all going on at the same time. So the first thing was just a dinner where everyone was just socializing, and then they had the round tables in different rooms in the hotel. So I just was closest to the room that said baseball, and obviously that's what I was there for as the baseball administrator. So I'm the first one sitting in the room, and it was so funny because there were about 3 people, because the way I sat, I could see people walking in the door. There were about 3 gentlemen who walked in the room and saw me and immediately turned around because they thought they were in the wrong room. They, in their heads, I assumed they were like, oh, this must be the softball room. And I would see them like look at the door, and it said baseball, and they're like, okay. So I'm excited for the day we don't feel like females really have to prove ourselves. But a lot of it is having that knowledge, and it's showing up. So we might need a little more push for a little while, but as long as you are committed to your work and your job and building those relationships, I think it'll just naturally come.
I don't know. The only thing I'm concerned about, Emily, is if you were the only one in 2019, we got a long way to go.
Yeah, I actually, so my previous supervisor, like I said, I worked with him with the sport of baseball for, I guess at the time it would have been 5 years. And we were able to have that transparent conversation of, he was like, I know you're going to do great, but he was like, I'm nervous for you. And I was like, well, I'm not nervous. Like, I want to take this challenge. And it takes those opportunities and those people like that give you the opportunities, because he could have just been like, I'm worried about a female being the baseball administrator. And so when I got the job, I actually reached out to the NFHS just out of curiosity. And out of there's there's actually more than 50 state associations for different reasons, but 50 plus state associations, and I'm one of 2 female baseball administrators, which is pretty wild. So hopefully we're forming the mold.
Yes, you are. You're blazing the trail. Even in 2019, you're a trailblazer.
You know, it's really kind of sad though, Emily and Donna and Jan, as this goes back probably to the early 2000s, when I was in Fort Myers and title president, whatever that meant at the time. And I was interviewed, and the reporter had asked me, do you feel that it is your responsibility to pave the way for other women in baseball? And I remember thinking, I had never thought about it before. And I said, well, if it's my responsibility to pave the way, I have no problem doing that whatsoever. I just want to know when I look over my shoulder at the road behind me that there's other women on the road. And unfortunately, the problem is, as I hear this, it is disappointing that we're now in 2020. It doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of gals that are still on the road. And what do we do to change that? I think that's the hardest thing. I'm not so sure, like, what is the issue? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And it's probably a completely different webinar and a different panel that we have to have that discussion at a different time. But
it's a worthy discussion, though. Definitely a worthy discussion.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, I can quit giving examples, but I'll give one more. Even in my own association, it was really interesting because it was kind of referred to as like the old boys club, the OHSAA. And so they had 3 secretaries that are the secretary you think of on like Mad Men, like the show Mad Men. Like,
okay,
I wrote this up, can you type this for me? Or, you know, they were called the girls. They were true secretaries, and they had probably 20 plus years of, they all retired with at least 20 to 30 years of work as secretaries. So everyone from our board to our district athletic boards that worked with these individuals, they, once they retired, they created the program coordinator positions, which is that first job that I had with the OHSAA. And they were saying, I think they were like, okay, we need to get in the times. We don't need secretaries writing our work anymore, making our appointments, that kind of thing. So they saw that opportunity. But I mean, it was even until, like I said, I started in 2014. It was even till like last year that it was either like I was referred to as, hey, have one of your girls do it, or, oh, are you an intern? It's like, well, no, I've been full-time here. So I've had it even in my own organization of kind of pushing that envelope more than I expected.
Well, Emily, you mentioned, and each of you have mentioned some various challenges, but before we go into some of the live questions here, want to get your opinions and your perspective on the question of what does remain, would you say, if there is one in particular, the biggest challenge for women in sports?
I mean, you know, I just gave several examples, but I think kind of the answer that we've all kind of alluded to is really that visibility. So, you know, we all said, and I'm in the same boat, I didn't have a female mentor. I had one female mentor who was my, during my grad assistantship. So that was only for 1 year, but she was very influential. But it's so interesting as I've been in the field now for 6 years professionally. And what I've really noticed is it was almost like there was one time when, and Linda and Donna, I'm not saying you're so much older than me, but
it's okay, you can say it.
It almost seemed like there was like this time in your positions where it was more welcoming, because I even see it in my own association of women in sports. And then there's this huge gap of that time, and then kind of when I started getting into sports, and like Donna, you just said the individual you guys just hired. So it's very interesting because I just feel like there's a lack of visibility of women in sports. And kind of that challenge too is in those areas that you don't see women. So, you know, in the sports of baseball, that kind of thing, now you're seeing female coaches. So like the Cubs organization, they just brought on a female representative, and, you know, it's applauded to them, and that's wonderful. But I think it's really big on just that visibility piece. And we just have to find those people that will take on those opportunities.
I think you're right. I think it's about access, right? When you begin to change a dominant business, in this case sports, that's used to looking, feeling, talking, smelling, acting a certain way, you'll have your trailblazers that get in. And now we have a cultural shift, right? Listen, teams are looking for women in sports. I always give Adam Silver tremendous, and even David. David wanted to create the WNBA, right? That created visibility. And it's interesting because coming up along the way, people would always say, oh, when do you think we'll have the first woman playing in the NBA? And I was not that focused on women playing, even though one of my former teammates when I played professionally was the first woman who played in the NBA. And her name was Annie Myers Drysdale, right? She married Don Drysdale. For me, it was like, when were women going to coach basketball? Because at that point, there's that recognition. I remember sitting in a room, it was Nike sponsored. It was the who's who in basketball. It was Coach John Thompson, God rest his soul, he just passed away. It was Coach Krzyzewski. It was Jay Bayless. It was David Stern. It was just incredible. And me. And you know, Emily, it's like, I was really okay with me being there, because as I looked around the room, I said, there is no one in this room that loves the game more than I do. They could like it as much, but they didn't have that over me. There should be more of me. And what Adam Silver has done at long last, right? Well, first it's sort of Popovich. He brought in Becky Hammond to be his assistant. And then Nancy Lieberman became an assistant at Sacramento. And then there was Jenny, who became another assistant. I forget which team she went to. And now a lot of the WNBA players and women from collegiate, the University of California, Lindsay Gottlieb is at the Cavs, right? All of a sudden, it was like these guys got permission. Not that they needed it, but they did. And there was a trend set. And all of a sudden now there's a lot of women in significant positions in men's basketball, men's professional basketball. Collegiate can be getting a lot better, trust me. We don't have enough women coaches, but there needs to be a push and some triggers to, you know, open it up. And let me just say this. We have a responsibility as women to hire the best people, but to look for each other. We have grown up, it's a unconscious bias, believing in a quota system. That when you went into a room, there was a seat for the girl and there was a seat for the black. There was a great scene once in one of these legal shows and said, oh, they were all gathering for this board, and the guy goes, oh, you must be the woman. He goes, she goes, oh, you must be the black. And it's almost like if we have that one seat, we don't think that if we bring another woman in, we'll keep our seat. Not only will we keep our seats, but we'll grow the seats for everyone. And our business will be better. And we need to be thinking like that and acting like that on a much more conscientious and intentional basis.
Yeah, I agree, Donna. I couldn't agree more. I think the interesting thing that some sports owners need to remember when it comes to women is there is definitely a push, and I hear this often, all the time, is that who are teams marketing to? You know, I hear this. They're marketing to moms, right? Because moms make the decision about the entertainment for the family. So moms are the ones that are going to buy the ticket, and moms are the ones that are going to take the family to the game. Yet, interestingly, there's very few moms that work at teams. So men are making these decisions about marketing to moms, and they know very little about the moms. They don't know what a mom does. They're not a mom. They don't know how a mom makes a decision to purchase because they're not a mom. And I think a lot of times that folks that run teams need to remember that. And maybe if we let them know that enough, they'll be more interested in hiring more moms. But
no, you're right. You're right. You're right. And it's just not baseball. It's every industry. That's
true.
Like
that. That's absolutely true. But I saw on my screen, one of the participants asked a question about how I felt about female executive awards. I was a recipient of the Rawlings Female Executive Award in, I think it was 2003. Oh my God, that was so long ago. You know, and how I felt about that. Well, I was quite honored at the time. And I think that, you know, as I hear everybody on the panel talking about, you know, how far have women come in sports and how far do we need to still come and go? I don't know. And I'd be curious to find out what you think, Donna and Jan and Emily, about this. I don't know how often women would be singled out for all of the wonderful things that they do if everyone were lumped in together as just executive awards. You know, would women be singled out with men, or wouldn't they? So do you follow what I'm saying? So
I'm not sure exactly.
Okay,
I know there's somebody here, Katie, who wrote in about Female Executive Year Awards. Are you referencing that?
Yes. So how, like, if we got rid of female awards and executive awards and just put it all as one, so it's just an executive award, it not differentiating between female executive awards and executive awards, separate.
Right.
Would women be as likely to win if it was just one award?
You know, what's interesting is I've had many discussions of late where very powerful and influential businessmen will say to me, what are you talking about? What do you mean this thing about gender? We all have to be the best and we're just going to pick the best people. And look, we just hired 3 women to lead, help lead. And I'm like thinking, are you really thinking about that? If you really look at the numbers, we're not quite there yet. What happens is that people tend to have an unconscious bias and they tend to choose the people that look like them, the people that they know. And you would like to think that the person that does the best job, no matter what they look like, will be one selected. And honestly, as long as humans are involved, you never can be quite sure if that's going to happen or not. Sure. I do think having categories is not a bad thing. Listen, I was happy to be the head of the WNBA, but I would have loved to have been considered an executive that can run the NBA. I think I could have run the PGA Tour as the commissioner of the PGA Tour, and that's a men's league. You know, the players started talking about that. The guys didn't like that at all. They didn't like that at all, and that's okay. I get that. So that's just kind of my thought. I did want, if I could, because I just think this is also so important, is Shelley Wilson mentioned on the chat, and I know, Jen, you're going to say this, but she's a woman of color, and she's very passionate about sports, and she's currently realizing her dream of building a sports marketing company. I think we just have to be very intentional about race, and very intentional. I think we have to, if it's uncomfortable to talk about it, figure out what that uncomfortability is and then try to approach it. I just want to say, Shelley, I'm rooting for you. I think we all are, and we want you to be successful. And not only is it the visibility of women, because the data on women in general, but then you look at the subset of women of color, it's really concerning. And what happens is women may be moved ahead, but the women of color are still left behind in startlingly low numbers, and we don't want to see that happen either. And so when I say when we speak up for each other, we do speak up for all of each other with great intent. So that's been some of my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure we get to a couple of these questions here that have been submitted. One by a student at Arizona State, Caitlin, wondering about the technical skills that are important and the day-to-day challenges in your work.
I'll try. I'll try this one. So I think that, any technical skills that you can bring with you are going to be helpful. So when I went from minor league baseball, we didn't have a CRM system. There were several things that we just didn't have. So I was living in a world of Excel sheets to keep up with everything. I switched to working for the Canton Charge. And so, there was a whole different ticketing system. There was a new CRM system there. I could go on and on. So I required a lot of training. So I'm quite sure that, had I come in with some of that background, that would have been helpful. But I would say, anytime you have the opportunity to advance any technical skill, because look, everything is going digital. Like when you are tickets, we have group links now, sponsorships. If you talk with people and you're trying to sell them a sponsorship, they want to know not only what you can do, in your arena or at your park, what can you do for them digitally? So whether it's you're really great at social media, that's huge now. Everyone needs a great social media person. Whether you're, good at, Excel, that's, believe it or not, still a great skill to have. Any experience that you have or any opportunity you have to grow your technical skills in any area, I would say take advantage of those. At the same time, places have different systems, so you're probably going to start somewhere where some training is necessary, but that's not a bad thing either. Marco, I don't know if that was the appropriate answer to that question. Technical skills that's kind of broad, but.
We definitely touched on some of the digital media and how to work with data as well. That has been pretty important. I want to ask Laura, who is a student at the University of Florida. We touched on this a little bit. I think, Donna, maybe you talked about this, but getting into coaching, player operations. For someone who's interested in that as a path, how do they get started?
Do you want me to talk? Coaching and operations generally. Linda, do you want to talk about that? No, you don't want to do that? It's funny because people call all the time, especially basketball operations, that they want to get involved with. It's interesting, in basketball, the pipeline is generally a video. You're usually a video intern, and then you become you work with video, you cut the highlights, and then you get close with the coaches. Then they know you understand what they're looking for, how the game moves, how to assess talent of players, and that seems to be a pretty good pipeline. Also, like at the college level, is being a manager for a team, no matter what level it is usually a way to get into the pipeline. The other thing is coach kids, do the work. Somebody said, how do I get, I love this question because I think it's related. How do I get experience when no one wants to hire someone without experience? I love that because, right, we're all in that conundrum. You know what? There is always a place for youth coaches. Always. There's a dearth of good ones. So if you're a good one, you can definitely set yourself apart. But there's always a place to be a teacher. And I think that's also another good place to begin to build your skill set.
Kind of a related question, but I think you can all probably relate to this from a broad perspective. Yvonne Lopez submitted this one. Being a woman in sports presents its challenges. What is your advice on being a great leader for your staff and fellow coworkers?
So I mentioned earlier, it's more, to me, it's more about what you do than what you say. So lead by example. Don't ask anyone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. So just modeling the behavior that you expect, I think, is very important of a leader.
Yeah, and I would also say just being open to different perspectives or ways of doing things. You might be kind of set in your ways of how you do something, and then don't be offended if someone comes to you and says, I know a quicker way to do this. It's being open to different perspectives and ways of doing things as well.
Yeah, I would love to add to both of those things that leading your team is about setting expectations. And Jen, yes, you want to meet those expectations, but also understand in a sense, as a coach of your team, that everyone has a different way of solving for X. I grew up thinking, hey, if I'm going to work as hard as I can, and if I'm going to do it, then everyone else will do it. It took me a while to understand that that wasn't exactly it. Yes, working hard, setting expectations, but it really is also being able to understand the individual skill set and styles. And I think, Emily, you're kind of addressing that too, of each one on the team in order to make sure that you can get the most to create the best team. And I think that a good leader takes the time to understand that. And it takes time to learn that too. I think it takes, you cultivate that over time and with experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jan.
I was just going to touch on that, Donna. That's so true. And when you're in education, you learn specifically about differentiated instruction. You can't teach the same thing the same way to every child. And I'm not saying that employees are children, but they're people, and people learn differently and people function differently. So it's exactly getting to know them, getting to know what makes them tick, and the best way to make them successful as an individual. It's not going to be the same across the board.
Right.
I think not only setting the expectations, like Donna said, I think that's incredibly important, but I think it is really getting to know as a good leader who your staff is and what they want. What is it that they want? What's the next step for them, and helping them to get there. So it's not just about what's today, but what they want tomorrow. And our job is to help them succeed. It may be outside of our own walls. It might be the next step. It might be that, Marco wants to be the broadcaster of the Cleveland Indians someday. So it's my job to try to help him get there. And it may be today, making him or helping him to become the best he can be today, but helping him to take the next step. And sometimes that's also pushing the bird out of the nest. And that it's not letting somebody stay where they're at. It's also understanding that I may, as a manager, have a need for somebody to be in a role, but that's not what they want. And so it's also knowing they're not going to be what I need them to be in that role. They need to be in a different role. So I think that's part of what makes a really good leader also, is helping your staff to be the best they can be in their direction.
Continuing a little bit on the empowering, you mentioned teaching as well. We've got a question from Rick, who is a professor of sport management at Marietta College in Ohio. With the highest number of women in our sport management program in its history, what can I do and what can people do in and outside of the classroom to continue supporting young women who aspire to be in the sports industry?
Hey, Rick, I'm just curious, what's the number? How many people in your program and how many women? Can you tell us that, or we can't talk?
We'll monitor the chat, and if he puts it in there, then we'll let you know.
By the way, I can speak to this. I sit on the advisory board of the DeVos School of Sports and Ethics at UCF. That's Dr. Richard Lapchick, globally renowned conscience of global sport. And he too has had the largest group of women. And as I teach there with him and I engage with his students, the best thing that you can do is provide opportunity and help them get the experience that they're going to need to go out in the world. As you think about your conversations, actually audit them a little bit, and realizing that now that you have men and women in the room, how does your thinking shift just a little bit? And it does, and it should. And also engage and listen. Engage and listen, because now you're going to have clearly a more diverse points of view, which we all would attest to making much better decisions for any company when you put more and diverse voices at a table. But show them that you see them, and obviously create a culture of respect. One of the things that I love about college sports, especially today when it's so much more robust than it's ever been, I saw it in the WNBA, I see it with my kids, is that these young male athletes who are elite and these young female athletes who are elite grow up together and they respect each other for what they commit, not only physically, emotionally, academically, to become the best they can be. And that makes a real difference as they go to life and leave the scholastic sports world and become co-workers in a business. And so I think the opportunity to see each other with the gifts that we each have individually, some of the differences that perhaps gender will bring to decision-making and conversations, supporting that in every way you can, and then sending them off into the world is a really positive thing.
Yeah.
And that's good UCF.
Yeah, and I can kind of jump on that as well of, Rick, you providing those opportunities. So I had that experience both in undergrad and grad school. In undergrad, I think there were, like I said, it was really recreation focused. So there was kind of a small group of us that were really sport management and the industry focused. And so we had my advisor, Dr. Stephen Ditmore at the University of Arkansas. He provided all of those opportunities for us. So he actually had us create the the first sport management club at the University of Arkansas. There was the individual you're talking about, Donna, I actually met because Dr. Ditmore provided us the opportunity to go to, it was at UNC Chapel Hill for a while, the opportunity my junior and senior year to go to the College Sport Research Institute conference, and we were able to present research, and we actually got published, which was pretty cool. And I never would have been able to do that if my professor hadn't provided that opportunity. And in the same realm, that's kind of what helped me find the grad school I wanted to, is because he was able to say, these are great programs. I can kind of connect you with some of the professors there. And actually I had met my professor in grad school, Dr. Brian Turner, at one of those conferences. And then even from there, I just think, I will say this forever, the opportunities that schools can provide to students is one of the greatest times, whether it's internships or like going to these conferences or starting these clubs and doing things like Jenna's doing. It could be as simple as, I realized, so I saw it firsthand. I went to the University of Arkansas, and then I went to the Ohio State University. OSU had a ton of funding, so the opportunities were endless. And at Marietta College, you might not have that. But it's even things like, Jenna came up with this panel. That doesn't cost too much money to do. So it's just kind of thinking creatively of how can I utilize not just my females, but all of my students, and, hope we can encourage females to join as well. There's so many opportunities at the scholastic level. And I think it's just huge that you as the professor providing those opportunities.
I have a question from an anonymous attendee. As I head into a career in sports, I am interested to hear about balancing your job with motherhood. I am young and would love to have a family, but fear the expectations of society will force me to choose between a career and family. How does that compare to, or I lost it now. But yeah, that was, I started reading the question and it disappeared on me. But yeah, the question about balancing, any advice on that?
Yes. Listen, this is an anonymous person. I should not make a biased assumption on whether this is a male or a female, should I?
Well, she talks question about motherhood.
Oh, okay, so all right, so I would say this: it is always your choice. Do not give up your choice. You will be able to have a family and a job. It will not always be easy, and some days you'll have to make choices that you might not be as comfortable as you thought you would be. But at the end of the day, it actually all works. And depending on the company that you work for, and certainly the changes that I'm seeing in terms of company culture and recognition of what is needed to not only be a worker in this world, but a family person in this world, they're starting to come a little bit closer together. And there's a lot of greater awareness. There are more dads, by the way, who also want to be dads. And that's as important as the moms who are taking the lion's share of the load. So at this point in time, you know what? If you feel the world's telling me something, I have very specific advice for that. You put your hands over your ears and you close your eyes and you go, nah, 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 nah. It works every time. And basically what it says is, I don't need to hear the noise, because that's all it is. It's all noise. There are so many of us who've done this. Jan, you have kids?
I do, yeah. They're older now. And I was, so 2 points. So your answer was great, Donna, but it wasn't specific, and there is no specific answer. There's no, step by step, this is exactly how you do it, A, B, C, and D. But you just exactly what you said, you can do it. I went sort of a whole life as a kind of an untraditional path. So I had kids before I went to college. They are only 16 months apart. They were both in diapers at the same time, and I wanted to go back to school, and I wanted to do it because I wanted to, I wanted them to see that their mother was a college graduate. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just decided I was going to do it. I took it day by day. I had all those fears of, what am I going to do every day for childcare? How am I going to do homework? And you just have to kind of realize that you're not going to have all of those answers up front. But just like, Linda, you said you were a single mom and you did it in baseball. And baseball is 70 games. It's, it's long, you're there from the crack of dawn sometimes until, the middle of the night. But you did it, and anyone can. And the second thing that I think is really positive for moms and dads right now is quarantine. I think we've learned so much about, and people have gained such a higher respect for people that have kids at home, because we're on these virtual calls, and we didn't have daycare for a while. We didn't have school for a while. And so I think companies have learned that they have to work more with parents who have kids. I think that, some of them might have learned that lesson on their very own. Maybe someone that hasn't thought about that or wasn't sensitive to that, and all of a sudden they're working from home and their kids are crawling on their shoulders while they're working, has really taught some people some lessons. And I agree with working for a great company too. But I really do think we've learned a lot of lessons about people with families during, the situation that we're in right now with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. I will say this. I've worked in baseball, as I said earlier, for 26 years. I have 2 kids. They're 10 years apart. I started in baseball when my son was a year and a half old. I was a single mom and raised 2 kids through this. So my daughter was 10. My son was a year and a half old when I started in this business. And as Jan said, 70 games. And when I started, I was at the bottom of the heap. I was an account executive at the lowest end of the low, and worked my way up to the top of the food chain as a president of a team. So absolutely, without question, yes, it can be done. You can balance both. I used to worry about the fact that my son didn't get to play Pop Warner football because I couldn't get him to practices, or my kids had to do their homework in my office, or they might have slept in sleeping bags in my office, and we went home after the game was over, or things like that. They're both grown now, and I've asked them both at length. And, my son will look at me and say, "Mom, I got to grow up in a ballpark. You think that's a bad thing?" No other kid got to hang out with Kirby Puckett during spring training, or Torrey Hunter, or play basketball in the player parking lot after a spring training game. That's a bad thing, Mom? So let me just tell you, yes, it can be done. My kids have great memories about this. It's not easy, but we're women. We figure out ways to juggle things that no other human beings on the face of the earth get to figure out how to do. So if it's your passion, you do it. And you, like Jan said, you figure it out day by day, and you will do it, and you will do well at it, and you'll look back at it at some point and you'll say, how'd I do that? And you'll do it.
I agree.
All right. Well, before we conclude tonight, I first want to thank all of you as panelists, all of you attending for submitting the questions. And we do want to thank also our sponsor tonight, State and Federal Communications. And we are pleased to be joined by the President and CEO of State and Federal Communications, Elizabeth Bartz, and she is going to share with us as well. Elizabeth?
Mute. Okay. Mute. Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Elizabeth Bartz. I am from Akron, Ohio. I guess I can say that now. My camera is off. Okay. Yeah, we can't get done with this pandemic until I can figure out how to do it. But it says I can't.
That's really funny.
But it says
you figure it out tonight. We're declaring it over tomorrow, okay, Elizabeth?
Well, it won't let me disable my video because the host has disabled it. So maybe somebody, Marco, Jenna, I'll get this right. But you know what? That's a much better picture of me. I'm just saying it. The host has said that I can start my video. Okay, here we are. So I haven't had the best day today. Haven't been feeling well. And I took a nap. Woke up after 7 and I ran downstairs and I got on and, Ken Babby's sending me texts saying, are you okay? Are you okay? And I am fine now, embarrassed, but I came on to the program hearing Emily say, you need to show up. Well, probably not the way I just did, but it is important, okay? And I think women do this more than men. They will go to anything to have that connection because Linda talked about how important relationships are. And what's true about that is that Ken Babby, being Akron's favorite son, knows relationships and had been talking to me about helping to sponsor an event, and he knew what would get me. He knew that having something with women would be the way to get me to help sponsor that. And so thank you very much. I have a very small business here in Akron, Ohio. We keep track of state lobbying laws and state campaign finance laws. So it's been a little busy these days. But I have about 40 people on staff, and I always say everyone is in the marketing department. Okay, I don't care. You might be somewhere. You might go home for a family dinner. What do? You have to be able to tell everybody what it is that you're doing. And mentors are so important. I think Linda was the one that said you need to have many mentors. And I started off having a mentor when I was a student at Kent State University back in the 70s, back there in another decade. But there's so much that I learned just for being on this program. And I support women who want to go into politics because we need more women in politics. And not me, because I'm big mouth. I say things I shouldn't. And I wish I had a remote for life so I could pause it before I answer something. So I am always encouraging younger women to get involved in politics and get involved in business. You have a great idea, run with it. A friend of mine, and she was my trainer when she was at another place, saw an opportunity and went for it. And I'm so proud that she did that. And I think when women do that, they find other women that will clap and say, thank you very much for what you're doing to help this industry, whether it's the yoga industry or the bakery industry, or with me, you know, just helping lobbyists. Jan, you had said life is full of mistakes. I have this, my hashtag is always learning, okay? Always learning. I still take classes on personal development, professional development. You also talked about, you know, when people make mistakes. I learned from my mentor back in the 70s that you need to be the first one to admit you made a mistake. If something happens at my company and it affected somebody, my staff knows, don't cover it up. You need to come in, you need to talk to me. It might be a tough couple of days, but we're going to get through it, and I'm going to be the one that calls the client to say there was an issue. And I think that is so important for women in whatever they're doing. And I don't know if anybody had the opportunity to read Lisa Leslie's article called Dear America. And it is amazing. And it deals a lot with race relations and how we treat people. But I just saw it over the weekend when she was interviewed by Maria Shriver. And I encourage anybody to find that article and read it. It really is exceptional. When I was on the call last week with these women, I was so proud to know there were so many women involved in sports. I mean, we see it. We have season tickets to pretty much about everything in Northeast Ohio. So I'm always looking, do they have a referee that's a woman? Who's there? The Cleveland Browns just hired a female chief of staff for the coach, and I happen to know her father from government affairs. He has his own government affairs company. And so you never know when you're going to meet somebody. Malcolm Gladwell had a book called The Tipping Point, and I knew from there I was a connector. If I see something that I know somebody can help, I will go in and make that connection. And that's not something men always do. So no offense to Marco and Ken, because, you know, we call them snags, super new age guys. And so we, but there aren't that many out there. And the whole thing this year with Kobe Bryant and being called a girl dad, I realized I had a girl dad. My husband is a girl dad. And these dads do a lot to really support their daughters. And we need to support these women. So really, Ken, thank you very much. Marco and Jenna, thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. And women, this was an awesome program. Awesome. I know they're recording it, and schools across this country are listening to it. And that is amazing, because Ken Babby is the super marketer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And now we do want to hear from the owner and CEO of the Akron RubberDucks, our host tonight, and the CEO of Fast Forward Sports Group, Mr. Ken Babby.
Hey, thanks so much, Marco. First of all, Marco, thanks for doing a fabulous job of hosting us tonight and keeping us all on the straight and narrow. I know a lot of work has gone into preparing for this, and as Elizabeth mentioned, I know you guys had a call last week just to prepare. And you know, I also want to thank each of the panelists tonight. You know, Jen, just being so open and honest and vulnerable with all of us in terms of your experiences. For all of the 150 people that were watching tonight to be able to take that in, and more that will watch this on a recorded session, you know, thank you. And Linda, you know, we thank you every day for the incredible leadership. We get to see it up close and personal every day as a part of our team. Emily, we're just meeting for the first time on video land tonight, but we're so thankful for all the contributions. I thought you were terrific tonight, and we're so thankful to have you in Northeast Ohio leading the charge. And I think the sky's the limit in terms of where you take us and where you take the industry. And I think there were a number of times tonight where I think we just said, wow, we're just so impressed with your leadership and everything that you're doing for the association and for the state. And Donna, just as always, just thank you for being here. Donna's about a week away next Friday from her own annual event, which I'll give her a chance to mention. But she inspires women, girls, mothers, leaders, sports executives all over the world. People are clamoring for her time and energy. And one of the positives, I suppose, of this pandemic and being on Zoom is that we can all be together tonight in this virtual sense if we can't be together in person. And Donna, your contributions tonight and just open and honesty and transparency with us goes such a long way. Elizabeth, better late than never, my friend. Thank you for being here. You had us a little nervous at the beginning, but all joking aside, such a champion for women in our community, in not only in Akron, but beyond. We are so fortunate to have you not only as a sponsor of tonight's event, but a champion. And I would just say too, that tonight really showed me, as Liz and I were sitting here watching, progress. We're not to the point yet where we're sitting here saying we're there. I don't think anybody on this call would say that, but my goodness, we're making progress every day. And soon enough here, Marco and I will be moving out of the way, and women will be taking over, and we'll be doing panels like this for you to tell us how to lead. But let me just share with you this. I grew up in a family with a full-time working mother. It was never understood that women weren't working and women weren't leading and balancing family and raising kids. That's all I knew growing up. And so as we formed this company many years ago, it seemed honest and quite frankly, just the only move to surround ourselves by strong, independent, wonderfully talented women. And many of them that are here tonight have been mentors for me. I consider them friends and partners, and they're certainly leadership role models for all of us. And so thank you so much. I also want to thank Jenna Smith, who really had the inspiration for this incredible program.
Good job, Jenna.
She's here tonight, and I know she has a lot of champions, friends, and family tuned in on Zoom from all over the country. Jenna came into my office in the middle of the pandemic and said, this would be a fabulous opportunity to pull together the best and the brightest from around the country to have a conversation that's something that's really important. And we said, bravo, go make it happen. And again, more than 300 people signed up for this program, and we're just incredibly thankful for you inspiring us to be here tonight. And so with that, I'll say thank you. Thanks to Dom for helping us keep us all on the straight and narrow. And there's Jenna. You can take a bow.
Yay.
Thank you, everybody.
And
Good job.
On behalf of all of us at the RubberDucks and around the country watching tonight, Liz and I just want to say thank you, and keep the road forward on progress. We need it, and we're counting on you to lead us into the future. Keep doing what you're doing.
Ken, you are a pleasure to work for, and without you, we couldn't have done this. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to leave us on the most positive notes. It has never been a better time to be a woman in sport. It is changing every single day. So, you know what? There's challenges to everything. Okay, so what? If you want to do this, do this. We're looking for you. We are looking for you in this industry. And thank you, Ken. Thank you, Liz.
Donna, tell us about 2020. Quick plug.
Yeah.
Quick plug, Generation W. I just put it in the chat here, 2020. It is an incredibly special day. If you want to be among leaders and be inspired and learn, it is a program, thought leadership event through the lens of women for all. It's all about how we see the world. It's amazing, amazing speakers. And, Dr. Lapchick, who I just mentioned, will be one of our keynotes talking about race, sports, culture. It's so powerful. Please join us, genwnow.com. genwnow.com. You learn to see the world through many, many lenses, which makes us all richer, smarter, and better. I don't mean richer like money, but, at the end of the day, that could happen too.
We'll see you there next Friday, Donna. Thanks so much.
Look forward to it.
Marco, back to you, bud.
All right. Well, thank you again to all of our panelists, all of our attendees tonight. Thank you to Jenna Smith for organizing, for the Akron RubberDucks hosting, State and Federal Communications for presenting this program. Thanks again. And Everybody stay safe and healthy, and we appreciate your time. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.